I'd given 10 years of my life to that company. 10 years of early mornings, cold coffee, and fluorescent lights humming over my head like a machine that never slept. 10 years of believing that loyalty meant something, that staying late, fixing other people's mistakes, and skipping weekends with my family would one day pay off. I wasn't chasing a promotion anymore. I was chasing peace, stability, maybe even a little respect. Instead, I got a text. The company can do without you. No greeting, no explanation, just that. From my boss, Greg, a man who still couldn't format an email signature but somehow earned twice my salary. I stared at the screen for a long time, waiting for it to make sense. Maybe it was meant for someone else. Maybe it was a test. Or maybe, after a decade of bending over backwards, I'd finally become disposable enough to be dismissed in a sentence. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. I typed, "Okay." Then I deleted it. I typed, "Understood." Then I deleted that too. Finally, I wrote nothing. Silence felt heavier, sharper. I didn't call him. I didn't ask why. Instead, I walked to the window of my one-bedroom apartment, looked out at the empty parking lot below, and realized something that hit harder than the message itself. He was right. The company could do without me, because I'd built everything for them to run without me. Every system, every workflow, every client handoff was my design. I'd automated my own existence. I'd made myself too efficient to be noticed. And for the first time, I wondered if that was my biggest mistake. That night, I sat at my desk, the same one I'd worked from during lockdown, with a coffee gone cold beside me and the company laptop still glowing in the dark. I opened my email. There it was, Greg's name in the inbox, bold and smug, like a bruise that wouldn't fade. No follow-up, no meeting request, just silence. You'd think I'd be angry. But anger's loud. I wasn't loud anymore. I was clear. See, I'd been keeping records, not out of spite, but out of habit. Every memo, every performance review, every undocumented favor Greg had asked me to do to make the numbers look good. All those temporary adjustments that somehow became permanent. I'd built the spreadsheet that kept our contracts organized, the system that processed payments, and the database that tracked client data. Greg didn't know the passwords, only I did. And technically, that meant something very important. I owned the process. So when I read, "The company can do without you," I didn't reply. I just opened a blank document, titled it Final Transition, and started writing an email. Not the kind sent in anger. The kind that ends quietly, but completely. I started from the top. "Greg, per your message, I've initiated the offboarding procedure." That was true enough. Our HR policy said employees departing voluntarily had to document their work for continuity. I was just helping them along. Please note that access to the project management systems, vendor accounts, and data pipelines has been secured to ensure compliance until further instruction from legal. Also true. Secured didn't mean deleted. It meant locked. All ownership credentials are temporarily paused until the transition plan is approved. The latest client files are archived under restricted credentials for review. And then one more line, simple, polite, devastating. Please have legal confirm acknowledgement of this transition. I hit send. Then I sat back, watching the little paper plane icon disappear into the void. 10 years of work condensed into a single email. 10 years of loyalty repaid with indifference, balanced in one message that would cost them more than they could imagine. At first, nothing happened. For 2 days, no one said a word. I kept my phone silent, went for runs, slept better than I had in months. It was peaceful. Eerie, almost. Then on the third morning, my phone buzzed. Once, twice, 3 times. First from Greg, then from HR, then a number I didn't recognize. When I answered, a calm voice spoke on the other end. "Mr. Bennett, this is Karen from the legal department. We've received your transition notice and need clarification regarding your authorization protocols." There it was. The shift. The panic behind the professionalism. I smiled to myself, leaned back in my chair and said, "Sure, but as Greg mentioned, the company can do without me, right?" The silence that followed was perfect. She cleared her throat. "Well, yes, but we do need your cooperation to restore access to—" "I'll cooperate," I interrupted, "once legal confirms I'm cleared of liability for the data systems I managed. Until then, everything stays frozen. Standard protocol." A pause, paper shuffling, then the quiet, careful tone of someone realizing they were standing on a minefield. "I'll need to call you back," she said. When the line went dead, I laughed. Not the bitter kind, the exhausted, disbelieving kind that sounds like exhaling after holding your breath too long. For 10 years, they'd made me feel replaceable. For the first time, they were realizing they couldn't replace me at all, and I hadn't even started yet. I didn't hit send to burn a bridge. I hit it to stop being the bridge everyone walked over. That's the part people never see. They see the email, the lockouts, the sudden scramble. They don't see the years that teach you how to write something that detonates quietly. Greg used to call me Mr. Glue. He'd say it like a compliment in front of clients and like an accusation when the door closed. If something stuck, I was the reason. If something broke, I was the excuse. The first time I realized the math of it, I was standing in a conference room after midnight, reheating coffee in a mug that still had someone else's lipstick on the rim. We'd just pulled the quarter out of a nosedive because a vendor API changed with zero notice. I wrote a patch, rebuilt our reporting, and sent a 4 a.m. summary deck. At the all-hands, Greg clicked through my slides and said, "We rallied." He never said who rallied. That became the rhythm. He took nouns. I swallowed verbs. The text, "The company can do without you," didn't land on a clean desk. It landed on 10 years of small cuts. The "We need you to be a team player" after he erased my name from a patent application. The "Don't make a thing of it" after he told me to sit out a client dinner 'cause you make them nervous when you get technical. The performance review where I'd carried 3 launches and still got meets expectations because Greg didn't want to set a precedent. I laughed in his office that day, quietly, because that was the moment I knew there would be an end. I just hadn't picked it yet. The end picked me on a Tuesday at 9:14 p.m. I opened the old folders the way you open a box after moving, carefully, a little afraid of what you'll find. I'm meticulous by nature. I document. Partly because auditors like clean trails, partly because I lived with a father who drank and a mother who kept ledgers. You learn early that paper remembers what people forget. I had everything: onboarding runbooks, vendor agreements, the emails where Greg told me to massage timelines so his weekly deck looked cleaner. I never massaged numbers, but I kept the instruction. Not to use, to know. The email I wrote wasn't angry, it was administrative. I CC'd HR and the team mailbox nobody checks until something's on fire. I used neutral verbs: initiated, archived, paused. I quoted policy numbers, the boring ones no one reads until they hurt. Data handling required segregation of duties. Credential rotation required sign-off. Client deliverables required version control approval. If you've never seen bureaucracy deployed like a tourniquet, it looks like nothing is happening. It looks like a man typing quietly in the dark. I rotated the shared keys through the password manager and put a 7-day expiration on the temporary ones. I exported a list of all open contracts with dates that would fail if someone, anyone, changed a column without knowing why it was green. I took the tribal knowledge everyone said made me valuable and turned it into a locked cabinet with a glass front. You could see everything. You couldn't touch it until legal acknowledged the glass was there. Before I clicked send, I read the text again. "The company can do without you." I typed one more sentence I hadn't planned to add. "Per your message dated 9:14 p.m. I'm treating this as initiation of transition support and will proceed per policy to mitigate operational risk." No sarcasm, no subtext. Just a mirror held steady. Silence is a skill. So is restraint. I didn't post screenshots. I didn't call a client. I didn't threaten. I took a shower, changed the sheets, and slept for 8 hours without checking Slack. The world didn't end, it just got quiet. In the morning, I made eggs, the slow way my ex used to like, whisked with water, not milk, low heat, small folds. We divorced 2 years ago, and I let work take the blame because it was easier than admitting I was complicit. Every time she asked for dinner without the laptop, I said, launch week. But every week became launch week, and when my father died, I missed the first call from my sister because I was on a client bridge call listening to a man say synergy 3 times in one sentence. Grief feels like static. Work felt like turning the volume up to drown it. That's the thing about anger. It's loud, but it's also heavy. Clarity is light. You can carry it. Greg didn't call that first day. HR did, with an email that sounded like a balm and read like a leash. We appreciate your cooperation. We're aligned. Could you share the credentials to expedite? I replied with policy citations and a calendar link for a handoff meeting with legal present. If you've worked in a place long enough, you learn the only conversations that stick are the ones with a witness. What people call petty is often just precise. I remembered every time Greg joked about me being the kind of guy who brings up rules at a barbecue. He wasn't wrong. The rules are the only thing that made men like him obey the speed limit. Around noon, the second day, one of the junior PMs messaged me privately. Are you okay? She's 26 and smarter than Greg will ever be, and I'd taught her where to find checksums when a file looked fine but smelled wrong. I told her I was fine and to keep her receipts. She sent a heart emoji, then deleted it. I smiled. There are inheritances that have nothing to do with money. Somewhere in the middle of the second night, I opened the file named Greg Deck Final Papiers and laughed out loud. I'd seen that file so many times it felt like a cousin. I wasn't going to leak it. I just needed to remind myself that leaving wasn't abandonment. It was refusing to babysit a man who stapled my work into his slides and called it stewardship. By the morning of day 3, legal finally called. The voice was careful. We've received your note. There seems to be some confusion. Confusion is corporate for, we didn't think you'd follow the rules we ignored. I didn't gloat. I said I'd be happy to walk them through everything provided my responsibilities and exposure were delineated in writing. We set a time. 10 a.m. Friday. I hung up and watched the sunlight crawl across the floorboards like it was learning the room. Here's the part I haven't admitted out loud. I cried, not a lot, not theatrically, just a few minutes of the kind of tears that come out of muscles, the ones you've clenched for so long, they forget how to do anything else. I'd built a life that made me necessary to people who treated me like furniture. And then, with one text, they set me free in the only language they respected. Inconvenience. Before the meeting, I printed things. I'm old-fashioned that way. I like paper in rooms where people lie for a living. I made a neat stack. Policy pages, vendor renewal clauses. The lines in the master service agreements where a missed SLA triggers liquidated damages. I wasn't going to wave them around. I was going to place them quietly on the table, like sheet music, and play exactly what was written. On my way to the cafe where I'd take the call, I passed the building where we'd held our first product launch party. Greg gave a toast that night and said, "To my team," and everybody cheered, because that's what you do when you're drunk on relief. I stood in the back near the exits, as I always did, and checked the monitors every 15 minutes, even though everything was stable. Some people call that anxiety. I call it responsibility. It's the thing they loved about me until they called it a problem. I ordered a black coffee and a glass of water and set my phone face down. 10 minutes to spare. I wrote a single sentence on the top of my legal pad. I am cooperating, not capitulating. It sounds dramatic written here, but it read like a reminder in the moment, the way a runner writes "breathe" on their hand before a race. You don't write it because you'll forget. You write it because you'll be tempted to do too much. Friday, 10 a.m. sharp. The call started with the kind of brittle politeness you hear at funerals and compliance hearings. 3 people on the other end: Karen from legal, someone from HR who introduced himself twice, and inevitably Greg, my boss, breathing too close to the mic. "Jack," he began, his tone syrupy and tight. "Let's keep this constructive, all right?" I could picture him sitting there, that permanent smirk he wore whenever he thought charm could undo negligence, the same expression he used when taking credit for my code in front of the board. "Of course," I said evenly. "I'm here to help. Within policy." A small pause, paper rustling, the legal tone kicking in. "Mr. Bennett, we've reviewed your email and the access restrictions you implemented. While we understand your concerns about compliance, your actions have caused significant operational disruption." Translation: "You shut down half our revenue flow for 48 hours. Greg jumped in. "This is exactly what I meant by overreaction. You're making this harder than it has to be. Just unlock the systems, and we'll figure out the rest internally." I let him talk, let him hang himself with every impatient syllable. Then I said quietly, "Greg, I didn't take anything. I followed written policy. Section 7.4 on data segregation. You approved it yourself last quarter." Karen hesitated. "He's right. I have that memo." The silence after that was exquisite. I'd spent years listening to Greg's voice fill rooms. Now the absence of it felt like oxygen. "Look," he said eventually, his voice lowering, "let's not get petty. You want to leave? Fine. Just don't make it ugly." "Ugly," I repeated, smiling into my coffee. "Greg, I've spent 10 years cleaning up after you. This is the tidiest exit I've ever made." Karen cut in before he could respond. "Mr. Bennett, for documentation purposes, can you confirm that all company data remains intact?" "Yes," I said. "Nothing's been deleted or altered. Everything's archived and secure. I've even logged where the system dependencies overlap. But for liability reasons, I won't transfer access until I receive written clearance stating that I'm absolved of future claims." Karen exhaled. "Understood. I'll draft the paperwork." Greg muttered something under his breath. I heard the word lawyer and something that sounded like unbelievable. When the call ended, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt calm. The kind of calm you get when you finally realize the storm you've been in wasn't weather, it was someone else's chaos. By Monday morning, the ripple hit. 3 vendors reached out. Apparently the invoices hadn't gone through. The automation workflow I'd designed required dual verification from the finance lead. That lead, Greg, he'd never bothered to learn how. Now payments were stuck, clients were calling, and upper management wanted explanations. I wasn't there to give any, but I did get an email from one of the project managers I used to mentor. "Hey, Jack. Don't know what's going on, but Greg's losing it. He's been in back-to-back calls with execs. Everyone's whispering about the finance audit. You okay?" I didn't reply right away. I stared at that last sentence. "You okay?" It had been years since anyone in that company asked me that without expecting something in return. That night, I opened my old notebook, the one I kept for myself, not the company, and flipped to a page labeled Promises. Little things I used to jot down when I was younger. Get promoted by 30. Buy mom a house. Build something that lasts. I added a new one. Don't let parasites write your story. The next morning, HR called again, but not about credentials. "Jack, this is off the record," the HR rep said quietly. "We've received a complaint involving Greg. I can't say much, but your documentation, the logs you submitted, may be relevant." It clicked instantly. They were auditing him. "I'll cooperate," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "Send me the request through legal." She hesitated, then added softly, "You should know. People here are talking. The execs found discrepancies in Greg's project budgets, the ones with your name on them." Of course they did. He'd been inflating numbers for years, moving funds between client accounts to make quarterly reports look healthier. I'd flagged it twice. Once in an email, he told me to delete for optics. I never deleted it. By Thursday, the first domino fell. Greg's profile disappeared from the internal directory. An anonymous email circulated to the staff that afternoon. Interim leadership restructuring. I laughed when I read it, not out of malice, but relief. Sometimes karma doesn't show up with thunder. Sometimes it just sends a memo. The same day I got another call. Karen again. Mr. Bennett, I wanted to inform you that the company has completed its internal review. You've been cleared of all liability. Additionally, the board has authorized a severance agreement for your cooperation and documentation. It's quite generous. I almost laughed. Generous. After 10 years of underpaying me, now they wanted to buy silence. Thank you, I said. I'll review the documents. I didn't ask for the number. I didn't care. I already had what I wanted, my name clean and Greg's in ashes. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, laptop open, inbox flooded with the fallout. LinkedIn messages, apology emails from HR, even one from the CEO thanking me for helping restore operational integrity. Funny phrase that, operational integrity. I poured myself a drink and read the message one more time. Then I deleted it. Because integrity isn't something you restore. It's something you protect, usually from the people who sign your paycheck. I turned off the lights, let the quiet settle, and for the first time in years, didn't feel guilty for doing nothing. I wasn't an employee anymore. I was free. And the company? They could finally find out what without me really meant. Freedom is a strange thing. It doesn't always come with fanfare, and sometimes it just arrives one quiet morning, disguised as the absence of dread. A week after the audit, I woke up to sunlight instead of Slack notifications. No meetings, no deadlines, just stillness. For 10 years, I'd conditioned myself to flinch at every vibration, every calendar alert. Now the silence was so complete, it almost felt violent. I made coffee and checked my inbox out of habit. Dozens of unread messages. Recruiters, ex-colleagues, a few reporters asking for comment regarding recent leadership changes at Vexton Technologies. I ignored them all. I didn't need to tell the story. The story was already telling itself. Because Greg, he'd gone viral. Someone now, not me, leaked the internal memo about his suspension. Then the client audit findings followed. Inflated budgets, falsified performance reports, off-the-books bonuses. It was all there. Within days, the local business news picked it up. By Friday, his name was trending on LinkedIn with the kind of headlines that end careers. Vexton CFO under investigation for financial misconduct. Leadership ethics in question amid whistleblower claims. Whistleblower. That word hit different. I hadn't called myself that. I hadn't even spoken publicly. But apparently, the compliance logs I'd provided to legal were now whistleblower documentation. The irony made me laugh out loud. The same systems Greg once told me to bend for efficiency had now bent back and snapped shut on him. Then came the email. Short, desperate, familiar. From Greg Mason. Subject, we need to talk. Jack, I know things got messy. I made mistakes, but this doesn't have to destroy everything. Let's talk before this gets worse. I read it twice, then a third time like I was studying an artifact. The tone was different. The arrogance was gone. He sounded small, human, afraid. For a moment, I almost pitied him. Almost. But pity is a currency that manipulative people live on. I wasn't going to fund him again. I typed 2 words and hit send. Contact legal. That was it. No anger, no revenge speech, no victory lap. Just boundaries, finally. 2 weeks later, the company made me an offer. A consulting position. Short-term advisory contract, they called it. They wanted help restoring the infrastructure Greg had neglected. Double the pay, flexible schedule, full credit. I said no. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about principle and peace. Instead, I took a week off. The kind of week where you wake up not knowing what day it is. And it doesn't matter. I flew to Colorado, rented a cabin, and hiked until my legs trembled. Somewhere between the pine trees and the cold air that bit like truth, I realized something. All those years, I thought work was who I was. Turns out it was just where I hid. When you strip away the noise, the titles, the meetings, the fake smiles, you're left with the person underneath. For me, that person was tired, but not broken. Wounded, but still sharp. I wasn't the company's glue anymore. I was the solvent. A month later, legal called again. Not Vexton's, mine. Karen had gone independent after the scandal. "You might want to know," she said. "Greg's been officially terminated. The SEC found discrepancies that go back 5 years. He's facing charges." I didn't ask for details. I didn't need them. But she added one last thing. "The board credited your documentation as the trigger that exposed everything. You could pursue compensation under whistleblower protection. It's significant." "How significant?" I asked. She told me. Let's just say it was more than I'd earned in a decade of loyalty. I signed the papers a week later. The funds cleared 3 days after that. The first thing I did was donate a portion to a nonprofit that helps laid-off tech workers retrain. The rest went into a savings account under my own name. Not a joint account, not a company fund, not someone else's dream. Mine. Months passed. Greg's story faded into the digital noise of other scandals. But every now and then I'd get messages, former colleagues thanking me, new ones asking how I'd known what to do. I never said I planned it, because I hadn't. It wasn't revenge that drove me. It was self-respect, waking up after a long sleep. Last week I got another text, this one from an unknown number. "You were right to walk away. Took me a while to understand that." No signature, but I knew who it was. One of the junior PMs, the one who'd asked if I was okay. I smiled, typed back, "Keep your receipts and your peace." Then I turned off the phone, closed the laptop, and sat outside watching the sun slide behind the mountains. For the first time in 10 years, I wasn't waiting for the next message. I'd already sent the only one that mattered. The company can do without me. Turns out I can do just fine without them.